Hello, welcome to this Ciencia en bicicleta. I am here today with Asia Jelic. Asia Jelic is a CERN physicist that works as a researcher at the International Center for Theoretical Physics, ICTP, in Trieste, Italy. She did her PhD at ETH in Zurich, in Switzerland. Then, from 2009 to 2011, she worked as a postdoctoral fellow in Université Pierre et Marie Curie and Paris Sud in France. And afterwards, she did another postdoctoral project, this time with the National Research Council and the Institute of Complex Systems in Rome. Asia's interests include statistical physics, complex systems, and collective animal behavior. Today, celebrating our new exhibition, which is called El vuelo de las aves and talks about how birds fly, we are going to talk about collective animal behavior. Specifically, we're going to talk about how certain birds fly, and as you might be wondering, why is physics behind all this? Okay, so I'm very happy to have you here, Asia.
I'm happy to be here. Hi.
And first, I want the audience or people that are hearing us to understand what is the phenomena that we want to describe. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, I can tell you a bit about it. If you want, I can actually show you some figures, some photos, so that you can understand it better. So let me share the screen. So I'm a physicist, I'm a statistical physicist, but some time ago, I actually started to study a phenomenon that is called bird flocking or murmuration often. And we will see today how physicists can actually help in understanding this type of behavior. And here already you see some of the flocks. In particular, these are flocks of starlings. And let me tell you about this bird, starling. Why is it particular? So starling, here is a common starling. It's very common in Europe. I think also there is some in North America. And what happens is actually that during winter, many of the starlings, like millions of starlings, are in particular stationed in Rome. So while they are flying from the north, they spend the winter in Rome. And what happens is actually that during the day, they're outside in the countryside, eating, searching for the food. And as the night is arriving in the afternoon before the sunset, they actually come back to the city and they're searching for the places to sleep over. So they're searching for some trees, for some parks, etc. And before going to the trees, what is actually interesting is that they perform this kind of dancing, this swirling, that is called murmuration. So in English, this phenomenon is called murmuration. And I can show you some videos actually from Rome. So I'm not sure how well you can see this, but here there are like thousands and thousands of these birds that are behaving in a very particular way. They are moving in a very uniform way, so very coordinated. So there are so many of them, but they don't kick each other. They don't. They also fly very cohesively. They stay together also, and we would like to actually understand this phenomena. Okay. I can maybe show you actually another video that can explain better. So here, actually, this is a video from YouTube. There are so many videos of this phenomenon because it's so beautiful. So what happens here is actually we have a flock of starlings that is trying to go down to the tree to sleep. And here, maybe I can show you, I'm sure if you see the pointer, we can see that there is actually a falcon actually here. There is a falcon trying to capture one of them for dinner. And you can see that the birds, I mean, there are a few thousands of them, I guess, here in this big flock, are moving in a very coordinated way. Look how they are changing the direction of motion, all of them. They're almost separating in different flocks, but still they stay together. And this type of behavior is called collective behavior. So you have many individuals, in this case, many birds, starlings, that are moving very uniformly in a very coordinated way. So this is the phenomena that we'll talk about today. Okay, great. And I think also in our social media, you can see another video of starlings flying. So this is why statistical physics and complex systems is involved, because in order to solve the question of how starlings move, you need to use complex systems and you need to use statistical physics. So why is this? Why is
Like, why do you need physics to explain this collective behavior?
Okay.
Or what are complex systems?
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, typically I would say that this is a kind of a problem that interests only biologists, no? And for a while it was like that. However, you can see that here we have a flock, a group of birds, and there are so many of them. There are several thousands. And each of them has certain behavior, but all of them together, they give rise to this macroscopic emergent phenomena. And this is exactly what actually statistical physics deals with. So statistical physics is a branch of physics that deals with the phenomena, with the systems that consist of many, many, many units or individuals. They all have kind of some their own behavior, distributive behavior, but statistical physics is trying to tell us, actually maybe I can stop sharing screen at this point because okay, so statistical physics is actually able to tell us what happens with the whole system, how a macroscopic phenomena can emerge from the distributive behavior of so many individuals. And yeah, so in statistical physics, it's developed over more than 100 years, and we deal actually with various systems, and we developed many theories and many models, and we know very well how to treat this type of problems where you have many individuals and then an emergent phenomena.
Okay, great. And so birds are these complex systems where this collective phenomenon emerges from small interactions, right? And
exactly.
do you see similar phenomena in other animals, Asia? Or
yes, actually, yeah, exactly. So this behavior, I showed you flocking, but actually this kind of collective behavior occurs in various systems and on various scales. So I actually now I'll show you just another photo. Let me. So yeah, you see here, for example, I showed you, I showed photos of various systems in nature where this type of collective behavior emerges. And it occurs on many length scales, from microscopic scales, where we have, for example, bacteria colonies here, to then, as we increase the length scale, we have, for example, insects form. So these are locusts. When we have fish schools, you have seen like the school of sardines moving all together. We have bird flocks that I'm working on a lot. Also mammal herds like sheep. And even at the level of humans, we have human crowds. For example, this is one of the pictures for you, probably from, I'm not sure actually now, but maybe from some concerts or something. So yeah, so this kind of behavior occurs in various systems. And in particular, this all these photos are one kind, they show one kind of collective behavior only. And this is called collective motion. So all these animals or bacteria at the microscopic level all are moving together and producing this type of collective patterns.
And is there a leader in this collective movement? Is there one fish or one bird saying, "Hey, let's all go this place," or is the answer different? Like,
no, actually, the answer is different. Yeah,
there's no leader.
There is no leader. Actually, this is a really interesting question because I think for everyone it's most natural that there is someone telling them how to do things. I mean, where to go, what to do next. But actually, only maybe now it's 30, 40 years ago that we understood that this is an emergent phenomena and it's also self-organized phenomena. So what happens actually is that these individuals, these birds in bird flocking, interact just with their nearest neighbors, only with the birds that are close to them. While the systems are very big. But however, this interaction that is very local, so I interact only with the neighbors around me that I see, it produces actually this macroscopic emergent behavior. So if I interact only with my nearest neighbors, in particular in flocking, my interaction, so my rule of motion, rule of what I'm doing, rule of coordination is actually imitation. So I'm trying to imitate what others are doing. So each bird in the flock is trying to imitate what the birds close to it are doing. Then the next bird is trying to imitate what the others are doing, and so on and so on. And then there is this kind of emergent behavior on the scale of the whole group that occurs. So yeah, so this is not, there is no leader actually here.
There's no leader. And who, like, if you want, you can stop sharing and we can continue talking about it. Like, what happened first here? was it experiments, or were there many theories explaining this collective behavior, and then experiments came? Like, could you tell us a little bit? I think this is important because Asia is a theoretical physicist, so she's in one side of things, but what she does in theory is connected to real experiments that I think are in Rome. So I want to know, like, were they theories that explain this collective behavior and then the experiments came, or was it the other way around? Can you talk a little bit about the?
No, actually, there are a lot of theories at first because experimental data are very hard to obtain. Mm-hmm. So, for example, from the 80s, right now, they started also proposing different theories and different models that all kind of had some similarities and a lot of differences. And there were they would make a program, they would try to propose a model, and then they would see how this model behaves. Typically, what you would do is you use a model, you put it in your computer, make a program, and then you see this behavior. What they observe is a behavior very similar to what we see in nature. So behavior that is very similar to flocking. However, it was actually very qualitative only, because the quantitative comparison with real data was very hard to obtain. And that is because to get experimental data on these flocks was very difficult. It was actually in Rome, now around 15 years ago almost, that the first data of the positions of the birds in a flock that they were obtained. Yeah. So it was a long time until actually real quantitative comparison with the data arrived.
And these experiments are quite cool. I was reading about it in a Physics Today article, and I think it's Andrea that worked with you previously, your ex-boss, and he was explaining these experiments, how they put some cameras near the train station in Rome.
Yeah.
And then it's interesting because they have this 3-dimensional information. Imagine you have like 1,000, are they 1,000 birds?
Yes. Yeah, sometimes there are 1,000.
Like 1,000 birds, and you need this 3-dimensional information, but the challenge is that once you put the cameras, it is what it is. So you take some pictures. This is what I read yesterday. So you take some pictures, and then you just hope for the best, because sometimes the flock might be too close, the flock might be too far, or...
Yes, it's true. Using a certain thing called stereometry. So it's a technique which allows you camera. What you get is just 2-dimensional. You can see a picture and you can 2-dimensional position of the bird. However, 2 cameras at least position of each bird in the flock, and complicated thing to do. However, first, before even producing that from videos, there was this story of the videos, because they put actually it is a group of Andrea Cavagni in Giardino in Rome. So what they did is actually they put 3 cameras every day during winter, so every evening on top of the actual museum building in Rome, in center of Rome, and close to that building. Yeah, it's Palazzo Massimo in Rome. It's close. It's just where the railway station is, the main railway station, Termini. And so there are a lot of trees, and starlings love to go to those trees. And so they chose this building because of that. And then every day, 3 persons were going on top of this building. They were putting the cameras, because you couldn't leave the cameras also there. You had to every day fix them again and be sure that everything works. And so they stayed there for a few hours waiting for the flocks to come. And it's exactly what you say. It was they were staying there for, in the end, the flock should be, it cannot be too far away, it cannot be too close, because you want to capture the whole flock. The flock should be within the field of view of all 3 cameras also. So, or maybe that they simply don't come to that place, maybe just a small number of birds. So, yeah.
So, but they managed to take the good pictures or good videos in 2005, right? Like
these were, yes, the first videos were done. Okay, the final results were published 2008. So these were the first type of experiments done, and they dealt only with the three-dimensional positions and velocities of flocks of birds, but at one moment of time. What is actually even more complicated was to follow the birds in time, so to obtain the full trajectory of each bird in the flock. So to follow them, for
to
example,
understand this bird is this one. Like this is more difficult, right?
Well, yes. At first, they had to also connect. If you have two pictures from two cameras, they have to understand which bird is which in one photo and the other. This is a complicated process. The next step is to have two videos. So you have a photo at this moment of time, then in the next, and then to each moment of time, you should connect the dots. You know which bird is which, and in which next time step also. And so this even more complicated. Maybe, well, let's say the next step was done in 2014. So this where they obtained really the trajectories, and so I worked really a lot on this experimental data.
So this is when you came in, right? Because you came like 2014. You were starting probably in Rome, from what I remember.
Oh, yeah, okay. I was finishing. Yeah,
but you got to
exactly.
So you started working in this project, Asia, once you had the data of the birds, right?
Yeah, they were arriving, let's say. So I also worked while the data were still kind of in process. So we tried to develop a theory based on this first experimental data to understand actually what we're trying to understand in particular was how the bird flock turns. So we would see this flock that suddenly all birds in a flock, like a few hundreds of them, they suddenly were able to turn all together. And so you wanted to know, but how they know that, they should turn in this moment, where this information comes from. And so for that, we needed actually these long trajectories. So a few seconds, because these turns are very fast. You've seen in the video, they move so fast, but how they know exactly when to turn, how this information of turning that they should turn propagates through the flock. This is actually what I did.
Okay. So the question was, how do they turn collectively?
Exactly.
But by studying single birds and their local interactions. And
yes.
Sort of. And can you tell us a little bit more about the interactions they have? Because I am imagining the people that are hearing us, and for them it's just birds. So it's like, do they talk? Some people, I think at the very beginning of this study, they thought it was like related to electromagnetic fields or to telepathy. So like, what is going on at the bird, like in the bird's neighborhood? What's happening between the bird and its neighbors?
Yeah. So at first there were a lot of there is a lot of interest, and so there were a lot of theories what can happen.
Can you tell me all of the crazy theories?
Okay, no, okay, no, but people were, of course, the first idea was that there is a leader, so that one bird in the flock is telling everyone what to do, where to go. The question is, in which way? So they were thinking maybe by telepathy, maybe there are some electromagnetic fields that they are sending to each other. And only after, when actually the first type of experiments arrived in fish schools that were done in the laboratory, did they understand that actually there is a kind of local information that is propagating through the flock. What does it mean? So it means that each bird or fish or individual in the group is kind of talking to only its neighbors, talking, not in the real sense talking, of course, but in case of birds, it's visual. So what they do is they observe what the birds around them are doing. So first of all, they want to stay within a flock. They don't want to go far away. They want to flock together because they feel safer and for various other stuff. So they want to stay together, of course, not too close because they don't want to bump into each other. They don't want to collide. And then what they do is actually imitation. So it's in physics, we would call it alignment. So they want to fly in the same direction as their neighbors. So they want to stay together to their neighboring birds, and they want to fly in the same direction. Okay. So if I fly there, my neighbors also want to fly where I fly, but I should also check what my neighbors are doing. And so this is the local interaction that we're talking about.
And this is very interesting. We were talking about the Nobel Prize of Parisi, last week and in a podcast we did at Explora, and we were understanding complex systems. And even though we were talking about different complex systems which have frustration, and here we're not talking about frustration. Last week, frustration represented a challenge because frustrated systems are difficult to understand, and it was thanks to Parisi that we understood more. The challenge here is a bit different because imitation or alignment is not that much of a challenge because we kind of understand magnets. This is how magnets work. You have one magnet in a, I don't know, in a net, magnet, 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 and each magnet wants to align with its neighbor, and then at the end you have a full magnet. But here there are two things that complicate the problem, I think, from my perspective. One is that they're moving, so you have like magnets that are moving,
Yeah.
and the second one is that you cannot bump into your neighbor. So you have this that complicates the problem, right, Asia? Is this the more complicated part, or what is the most complicated part?
Okay, the fact that they are moving, actually, it differs. It changes everything compared to the regular system that we are used to. And so also bird flocks are kind of part of this family of systems that in physics are called now active matter systems, active systems, if you want. What active means is actually that each individual is not just standing still on a lattice as we are used to, but it uses some energy, chemical energy, or some energy from the environment in order to move, in particular to move. There are also other, or to exert some mechanical stress also, but let's say here to move. So I eat, and then this is helping me to move, and I want to move in certain directions. So this is something that is very different with respect to the systems that we are used to with magnets, yes. So these are out of equilibrium systems, we also call them. So they're usually more complicated. Another thing is that actually, apart from they don't want to collide, this is also, but I think the main point why they're complex systems is also that while in magnets, we can, all the magnets are the same. I mean, all the spins on the magnets in a lattice, in a magnetic system, for example, typically are the same. And we know very well their interaction. And this interaction is the same between each pair of magnets. Here, this is not the case. We do not know really their interaction. We assume, but this is not always the case because these are living systems also. Active, but living systems. We cannot predict all the thoughts, I mean, all the process that actually bird is doing. So it's not just that it makes errors, that it's not able to imitate the other birds, but also it has certain decisions of its own. So this is what is characteristic of complex systems also, that this type of interactions are not so easy, known or not stable. I mean, they are not constantly the same like in regular systems. And this gives rise to many complications in the treatment, in the theories, in the modeling, etc.
And so far, like in this field, and I understand its complexity. The complexity is due not only to the large amount of birds, but also to the fact that they're active, and also to the fact that they're living beings. Because I mean, as physicists, we, instead of drawing a cow or a bird, we draw a point. And instead of having like vision and everything else that goes in the birds, that determines the bird's action, we just say he interacts with its neighbors considering these three things. So we really simplified the problem, right? But what I was going to ask Asia is, what is known, like what are the questions that you would say they're kind of solved, they're okay, the physicist community and the biology community are okay with these questions, they think we kind of understand? And what are the questions on the edge? What are the most interesting questions in this field now?
Okay, so I think it's really difficult to say in this field that is very active at the moment, what are the questions that are completely solved? I think everyone would agree that in these systems, the behavior is self-organized, so that the behavior emerges from these local interactions. Not everyone will agree on what the interactions are exactly, how you model them, what is the most important part of interaction. So these things are not necessarily all clear. I mean, more or less there is a consensus, but of course there are also some theory, some differences. for example, in various systems, when I say that the birds are looking at their nearest neighbors, so the birds close by, the question is, who are the nearest neighbors? So in the flocks, from the experimental data, they were able to obtain that actually birds always looks at 6 or 7 nearest neighbors, independently how far they are. So they can be half a meter away, but also 1.5 meters. The birds will look at these 6, 7 neighbors. This is not the same maybe in other systems. For example, in fish, they found that it's actually differently in the sense that the interaction is more metrical, so that they are looking basically in the neighbors that are within the distance of, for example, 1 meter. So there are various things that are maybe not completely understood or clear, or not clear to everyone. I think recently there was a lot of things done on the dynamics, so like how the birds are turning. I think what would be really interesting is to understand exactly. So we understood, for example, how birds are able to turn all together. However, we are not really able still to say, if I have a flock of birds and I send myself like a falcon on it, how exactly the bird will turn. Am I able to predict that? Well, not yet, because there are a lot of things that are not known exactly. So we pretty much understand the system. Some things quantitatively, some things qualitatively we know, but there are other things still to discover. So yeah, I think the response of a group with respect to some kind of perturbation would be really interesting to do.
And to be able to predict, like, what happens if you have this flock and then a predator comes?
For example.
Okay.
Yes, and of course.
Yes, go ahead.
No, I wanted to say also, I showed you also the other systems. So of course, it would be interesting to see how many of all this is valid also in other systems, because the systems, while from a physics point of view, we are trying to simplify the system, which in some way is good because we can concentrate really on the most important thing that gives rise to the phenomena. For example, in the case of birds, it's really this imitation, this interaction that is alignment that gives rise to this phenomena. We would like to understand in diverse systems, by looking at these simple models, whether they describe different systems in a similar way. So this is from kind of, is there universality? Is there some similarities between the mechanism in all these systems? So
great. I think this is interesting also, like not only thinking about these specific fields of physics, because it shows how science works now, or at least how physics works now, because you have, I mean, theoretical physics has always been the same in some way, in the sense that you have a system, you have a model, and in order for the model to be okay, you have to describe what is going on and be able to predict. And this is how physics evolves. Physics is always incomplete, or science is always incomplete.
Yeah.
Sometimes you think that science is like a final point, but my perspective is more that science is like the process of going to a final point that you never actually reach. And I think this is interesting because here you have this. You have probably many different groups across the world, interdisciplinary groups that are working on this problem. They're not only working on birds, but working on fish or working on materials that are all self-organized. And they're understanding bit by comparing with the experiments, which is more accurate, which model is more accurate, which interaction is more important, how many neighbors do you need to consider. So physics is advancing, or these models are advancing little by little. And I think this is interesting because it shows the incompleteness, but at the same way it shows like the interplay between experiments and theory, and the fact that now, for example, it's not just one person doing one model, but it's more a group thing. I imagine you work with a group. Like, how is your group? Is it interdisciplinary? Do you have biologists?
Depends in which projects, but yes, I mean, when we worked a lot in Rome, for example, there were people that also are not necessarily physicists. They can be mathematicians, they can be computer scientists, and also this collective behavior is very interdisciplinary part of science. I mean, so you have biologists, of course, interested in the problem. You have physicists that use kind of statistical physics and the models that we are used to in order to understand the problem. You have computer scientists, you have people from robotics, because they're interested also in artificial systems, how to use the knowledge from natural systems, so biological systems like flocks of birds, and in order to incorporate the rules into artificial systems like robots forms. So yeah, it's a very interdisciplinary subject, and I really worked a lot with different people, because I also, apart from birds, I also worked on pedestrians a lot, and that was also very interesting. Yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit about pedestrians? What are the questions in that field, or what were the questions you were solving?
Okay, so I mean, pedestrians with respect to birds are a bit different. I mean, and the importance is also maybe for us even higher, because what people are trying to understand is how exactly we change our behavior, how we adapt to other people around us. Mm-hmm. And why is it important is also, for example, just to organize pedestrian traffic in cities, but also for like evacuation purposes. Like if you have a concert or a theater hall, if there is fire or something, you want to understand how where to put the exits, so that you can already make a prediction how people will behave, in which way they will move, in order that people don't die. Also in the very big crowds, like on concerts or rave parades or whatever, there are so many people that they are so close to each other that at some point the whole motion becomes turbulent, and there are many cases and many people die. So you want to predict that and to understand what exactly you should do to prevent these accidents.
That's so interesting. And I was reading yesterday that this is also used, for example, and it's not difficult to understand, for example, in finance or in economy, or even like to understand how people vote. Because if you think about it without thinking about birds, it's like how collective behavior emerges from something that is with your nearest neighbor. So, for example, people are extremely influenced by fashions or their neighbors. What is the impact, for example, on markets or in stock markets?
Or social networks. I mean, in social networks, everyone is connected to their own friends. However, there is a certain phenomena, a news or whatever, that suddenly propagates through the whole network, and it depends very much how fast and everything you would like to know, and that is based on it's a collective phenomenon that emerges exactly from these connections between these people. So from the networks, how people are connected in certain networks, and so in this case social. And similar was in birds, because each bird interacts with its neighbors, but then you can construct the full network of this neighborhood network within the flock, and you wanted to understand how one information, for example, to turn, would propagate through the whole flock. Similarly, in social networks, for example, you want to understand how some effect can become so similar to turns fast.
Yes, I think this is like what's really interesting about complex systems, that you have different complex systems and different models, etc., but they are useful to explain so many different parts of reality, like from economy to voting to how flock birds fly in Rome.
Yeah, I think as physicists, you see that all these phenomena, although they seem very different, actually they are same or similar techniques that you use in order to explain this phenomena. So, and that's why they kind of all go under this umbrella that is called complex systems. Yeah.
Asia, and I want to talk, like at the end of this chat, I want to talk more about you as a scientist. But before I jump there, I wanted, is there anything else you want to tell us about, for example, about flocks of birds, or anything that you think this is so interesting, or this group is doing this interesting study? Is there anything last that you want to tell us, or should I jump to the other topic?
Yeah. Now you got me. I didn't think what I can tell. I think there are really a lot of interesting things that are going on. There are a lot of groups in the world. I mean, I don't even to mention any of them in particular, but for example, I really like experimental studies, like with virtual reality, for example. Well, there is not still many of the results, but I think this is you put like some animals within a certain environment, virtual, and you see how it reacts. And yeah, I think we will be able to
That's
understand
cool.
many
And
things.
who is doing that? Who is doing that?
Oh, there are several people that I know now. For example, there is actually collective behavior is so currently very active field that, for example, in Germany there is Max Planck Institute fully dedicated to that, for example. I mean, but also, I mean, there are many places in the world. But
that's interesting. Okay, now every time I interview someone that is a scientist, I want people that are hearing us to understand like how the day looks like, what got you here. So I'm going to start with one question.
okay.
Like, when did you, like, could you tell us a little bit about your research? How, like, you did your PhD at ETH, but was it in
Yes.
birds or was it in something else? Like,
No.
what
No,
led
no.
you to birds? Like, could you tell us a bit about
Okay.
how you?
So I was born in Belgrade in Serbia. It's former Yugoslavia, and so I always liked, you know, solving logical problems and such things. I was good in maths, but I didn't really plan to study math. It was too exact and so I studied physics. And I would have never told at that moment that I would study birds at some point. So I actually applied for a PhD in Zurich, so at ETH. And I like statistical physics a lot. So I found a group that is working on problems in out of equilibrium, in particular out of equilibrium thermodynamics, which is kind of connected to statistical physics. It explains macroscopic systems. And I was working with relatively, not a regular problem, but I would say just a classical physics problem. I worked in soft matter. So soft matter are kind of materials that can be for example, squished or they're soft. I mean, and it was quite theoretical. Although in the group there were a lot of experiments, so I like this type of interaction that I had, but I never actually did anything related to experiments. And then somehow I wanted to do even more. Once I remember I was in a conference once. It was in Genoa, actually, in Italy. It was a big statistical physics conference. So I think this is the first time that I heard a talk on birds. And so I already knew about this kind of group in Rome that is doing that. But okay, I didn't end up going there first. I went to Paris to study some more regular stuff like spin systems. And then slowly, somehow I found out about a project on pedestrians. And so I started to do that. And so that led me actually to this group in Rome, where I could apply both my knowledge of statistical physics, just standard work on spin systems, but also together with the knowledge of experimental data, because I worked on pedestrians. And so a combination of these two actually led me to the Rome group. And so it was unexpected. I mean, I think also when you do your research, it's not always clear where you will end up.
For sure. I mean, for sure. But I like to like put the dots and then put the lines in the dots. But and how is, so you're a theoretical physicist. How does your day look like? Like, what do you actually do in your day? Do you?
Okay. I think as theoretical physicist, I worked a lot with experimental data, so I use a lot of also simulations. So I use a lot of computer, but I use a lot of paper and pen. So when I come to the office, of course, there is a lot of time that I think by myself. I study the literature, which means I read recent articles on articles that interest me and see what are the works done on the subjects that interest me, what can be done also, how I can solve some problem that I have. And then a lot of time also is working with other people. So here in ICTP, actually, I work also on some other projects that, for example, with chemists. And so I talk a lot with them about problems, also collective behavior, but not in animals, just in completely physical systems. So a lot of time is also spent in discussion on what the problem is, how to solve it, and so on. So this is basically what my day looks like. And of course, there is a lot of teaching also. So here I teach a group of students that actually ICTP, so it's an international center for theoretical physics, and parts of its mission is actually to advance scientific knowledge also in developing world. And so we have this kind of a program that brings students from even least developed countries in the world to study here for a year and to kind of give them some push in order to get more knowledge, and maybe later on obtain PhDs in other universities. Maybe at some point go back to their country, and so I give lectures to this group of students. So this is my day.
Okay, great. So Asia, I want to thank you because it was great seeing you again and talking to you.
Yes, also to you. I hope you will come back to Trieste one day.
I have to go back to Trieste. She didn't describe where she lives, but Trieste is this city that is so beautiful. It is in the northeast part of Italy, near the Adriatic Sea, and there is this Institute for Theoretical Physics. But the city is perfect size, and it's also, I think, it's a perfect mix of Italy, but also
of Central Europe. Yeah.
Also Central Europe. I think in the food, in the dialect, which I don't understand, but it's a magical place. So I definitely want to go there, hopefully soon. So it was great talking to you. And for those that are hearing, I think this is just like one talk and one conference, but I think it's related to a topic that is extremely beautiful, because it is how collective and this beautiful behavior of birds, in this case of starlings, of flocks of starling, can be explained by simplifying the problem and considering simple interactions. And also, I think it's very beautiful because I think that science should not be that disciplinary. And this is a part of science that is not only popular, but it's really interdisciplinary. It has to do with biology, it has to do with robotics. You have to optimize things in order to get this 3D information out of these two-dimensional pictures. So I think this is also an interesting conference because it shows you this interdisciplinary side of science, and how what you know in physics is useful for biologists and vice versa.
And vice versa also, yeah.
Yes. So thank you everybody for listening to us, and bye-bye.
Okay, bye. Thanks.